Welcome to Beyond Sports. Well, we've got a great show lined up for everybody here today. First up, we've got Nuggets Now, followed by a very exciting interview with benchwarmer Brand. Brandon joins us here in the studio for a great interview. Then we're going to break it down with a state of the Nuggets. So just taking a mid-season look and where the Nuggets currently stand. Co-hosted also by benchwarmer Brand. Great to be able to have him on for a couple of segments. And then we're going to top it all off with our mid-season awards. So just kind of encapsulating everything here going into All-Star Weekend. So segueing off of that, looking at the current state of where we're at this past week, a couple of wins, one loss. Bob, what's some of the takeaways here over these last 3 games?
Yeah, they got a big win in L.A. I think that was kind of the biggest takeaway from the week. The very next day, however, they got a big loss to the Kings. Granted, Michael Porter Jr. was out. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was out. I mean, that's 2 of their best defenders right there.
Yeah, MPJ played a pivotal role in the win over the Lakers. Love seeing him hit 27 points.
Huge.
I think those are the types of games that's going to get his confidence up. And I think that's really realistically what we've kind of seen from MPJ is just wavering confidence. There's some times where he's really feeling it and the shots are going in, but we know he's capable of consistently delivering, I would at least say 15 points per game every night, just avoiding those.
He's definitely capable of it.
Yeah, and if we're going to win another championship, we're going to need that from him every single game going into the playoffs. So just good to see him in that playoff atmosphere, really stepping up to the plate, especially after the disappointing finals series where, we really needed MPJ, and he did perform in a couple of the games, but overall, shied away from his overall potential. So just good to see him get a little bit of his rhythm back in that big-time playoff atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. He shot 71.5% from three-point against the Lakers. So
just on fire.
Yeah, he was doing incredibly well. Something to go off what you were saying, he definitely does go through shooting slumps. However, I do like what I've been seeing lately as far as how he gets out of them and what he does differently as far as he cuts to the basket more and he takes mid-ranges more. And he's been making a lot of those shots. And it's kind of been getting him into a better rhythm overall, I would say.
And one thing about MPJ's game that's kind of a little bit different from the other players is, kind of similar to what you're talking about. I think the whole Nuggets team, the majority of the players play with that mindset every time they step onto the court. And MPJ doesn't necessarily always bring that same game plan. It's more so I'm just trying to get shots up and more of that volume shooter approach. And so it is really good to see when he is willing to make the smart cut to the basket, the extra pass or the assist, really getting to the hole. And I think for MPJ, the key to success and the big change he needs to make moving forward is just let's make some smart basketball plays. Let's continue to play the best basketball we can and not necessarily let's get you 20 shot attempts or 15 shot attempts or 10 shot attempts. Let's really focus on making the right shot attempts.
Yeah. I will say an underrated part about him is his defense. He's been
100%
so good this season and last season.
And reliability too as well.
Yeah.
Along with the defenses, we've been able to count on him every single game this year outside of the Kings game. He played every game up until then.
And having AG, KCP, and MPJ all be good defenders really helps kind of mask Jokic and Murray's
questionable defense.
Yeah, they're really not negative defenders by that much, but I'd just say flaws.
Yeah.
It helps having those 3 phenomenal defenders out there.
100%. And it definitely takes the pressure off of them. And I think one cool component is it allows them to make the big plays down the stretch at the end of the game because they are free to kind of seg off their man to go and get an extra block when they need to. or play that extra pressure defense. So it's been very fortunate for the Nuggets. I know Mike Malone's a big stressor about defense. He was recently commenting on the Nuggets defense and how that's the key to winning a championship is truly that defensive component. And even though overall I think defensively we were not quite as good as we were last year, I think we're about the same And I think I'm happy with the defense play. And I think the Kings game was real evidence of the impact that KCP and MPJ have.
Oh, absolutely.
Because realistically, yes, the Kings are a tough team, but are they true contenders against the Nuggets? And I would say no.
On a second night of a back-to-back, sure, they might even still win, even fully healthy. But winning by 29...
unreal.
Yeah.
I was watching the game, and it was very evident that they were tired. But the biggest thing is we just
Fox did really well.
When we missed the offensive end and the defensive end of KCP and
Sabonis
MPJ.
played very well, too. I do got to say that.
Yeah. Well, and Sabonis is those guys. He's getting his numbers every night. He's very
leading
dependable.
the league in triple-doubles.
Yeah, and he got his triple-double to tie in the tiebreaker against Jokic and in the game against the Nuggets.
Yeah.
Which you got to love. I like Sabonis a lot. Plays with a lot of heart. Kings are a very underrated team. They continue to go underrated, not getting anybody selected to the All-Stars. I think Sabonis was recently selected as an alternate, if I'm not mistaken. But overall, pretty crazy to see that Sabonis is in potential MVP conversations and yet not looked at an All-Star level.
Yeah. I don't... He might be talked about for second-team All-NBA, but I don't know about MVP.
There's quite a few charts that have him in the top 10 of their MVP voting overall going into the year, at least at this point in the season. Sabonis is definitely in the top 10 of a lot of people's brackets at the moment.
That's crazy to me. So I think a big takeaway from this week is there was a lot of turnovers.
Yeah, and turnovers seem to be an issue.
Games.
And I think this has been a bit of a consistent issue throughout the season for the Nuggets, and I think it just comes down to their inability to get their offense on a consistent flow. One thing we see a lot with their offense is just a lot of these ups and downs, and it seems to be almost a lack of rhythm for the majority of these games. It just seems we're always fighting for these wins, and it just doesn't seem to be our typical domination that we had last year, where we would just come in and we would just absolutely manhandle these teams. And now it seems like we're fighting to get any win we get.
Yeah, I mean, AD had 3 steals and 4 blocks. It was kind of sloppy, if I'm being honest. And it was sloppy in the Kings game, sloppy in the Portland game. And I think it's something that they're going to tone down and kind of figure out a little more as they kind of get in better rhythm, especially after the All-Star break. But it's something that worries me a little bit.
Yeah, one thing that really worries me, and it's happened all year, is their transition offense.
It's not looked good.
It was the unquestioned number one transition offense last season, pretty much the entirety of the year. And this season, they are hovering around the bottom.
Yeah.
They're hovering around the bottom all year. And all the announcers that I've watched whenever we're hearing about broadcasts about the Nuggets, they're talking about this subject. They all talk about they just don't understand why the change. We've had very little changes in our roster.
Outside of Bruce Brown.
Jeff Green.
And
I mean, on the bench, that's definitely running the floor.
Jeff wasn't running the floor too much.
He gave us some pretty high-powered minutes.
Yeah.
When he was in, I mean, he looked young
He was getting
athletic
dunks in the half court, though, I felt like.
He posterized Giannis last season.
He was fun.
That was one of my best memories of last year, just seeing Jeff Green. And he had so many of those big-time dunks that got everybody up. It was a nice spark plug off the bench, and I do miss having that. And that's one thing I think we're still seeing from the bench is that spark, that life. And one thing we did see a bit of a bright spot in the Kings game was CB getting 13 points. And it's just nice to see his rhythm. You know, one thing Mike Malone had reported having a conversation with Christian Brown about his performance so far this year. I think that's a perfect time to have this conversation. We're at the All-Star break. It's like, look, we've had a long span of data here. This is how you performed. You know how you've performed. You can do better.
Been as good as you
and
can
he challenged him. And I really like Mike Malone for that because we're coming at it from a balanced perspective. We're encouraging our players to do better, but we're calling them on their shortcomings, which is deserved. And I think that's how this is going to be a better CB. And you saw a more aggressive CB throughout this week. And I think he is really trying to make the similar impact as he did in the playoffs last year. I think he wants to get back to that level of playing. And I'd love to see that from him. And him and Peyton Watson are really going to be big X factors going into the playoffs. If they can get their stats together and they can get sharp, I think we have an unquestioned ability to win the championship. But if they're looking sloppy and uncoordinated and we still have the bench that we have these past few games, it's going to be tough to win.
Do you think we go and get anyone in the buyout market? 'Cause
I would love to
I've
see
thought
that.
about it. I don't know if we can.
It's tough because we have restrictions. So anybody who had a $12.5 million contract that has been recently bought out is off the table for us. So realistically, though, that does open it up a lot more than the trade market did because we were looking at low-cost players. But now it makes it so, hey, a high-cost player who doesn't necessarily have a team to play on now has a home, like a Spencer Dinwiddie did with the Lakers, or Kyle Lowry did with the 76ers. If we could secure a player like that in the buyout market, I think we would be extremely fortunate, and that would be our best possibility in improving the bench at this point in the season.
I think getting a veteran presence off the buyout market, I know that we talked about it with Braun, but Danilo Gallinari, I thought that
reunion with the Nuggets would be great. I know the fans would love it.
Decent idea.
He could give us some supercharged offense, but Gallinari's also questionable. But at this point with the bench and how their offense has performed, I'm willing to try anything.
I'm willing to try it. I really wanted Gordon Hayward.
Hayward would have been some gymnastics there, but
the Thunder got him.
Yeah, and the Thunder, that was a great move for them.
Phenomenal move for them.
They just got a lot better off the bench, and they were already good. And what I think that realistically they gained the most is veteran presence.
Yeah, absolutely, because that team's super young, and then they just have ancient Gordon Hayward on.
And we're talking about a Gordon Hayward who led Butler to a Final Four appearance and a Finals appearance.
Yeah.
Which was pretty incredible back in the day when Butler had no business being there. So it's somebody who knows how to win.
Shot too.
Yeah, could have won, but still, Thunder get tougher. Nuggets, we kind of still seen more of the same with them. Good thing is we're not seeing more losses. It just keeps coming down to the bench. The starters are holding it down. We need all five of them when it comes down to winning. But at the end of the day, it's our bench who's going to make the real difference going into the rest of the year.
Yeah, absolutely.
This has been Nuggets Now. Tune in after our break for an interview with Benchwarmer Brand after this. Welcome back to Beyond Sports. I'm here with a very special guest today, Benchwarmer Brand.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on, Brandon. So, for our listeners out there who aren't familiar with your page, why don't you walk us through a little bit about what you do on social media?
Sure. So I've been a sports comedy content creator for almost 4 years now. Kind of started doing these little fantasy football skits to help people cope with when their teams are terrible and help me cope with my team being terrible that year. And just, putting these teams and players hypothetically in very interesting and comedic situations. So if you enjoy laughing at your team or other people's teams, I think my content might be for you. Got some longer form stuff on YouTube as well, but I think I'm kind of known at this point as the shorts and skit guy, which I am more than okay with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would definitely agree with that. I mean, my fantasy football team went 7-0 this year, and then I ended up in last place.
We hate the fall off. We hate the fall off.
It's crazy. Brutal. And your videos helped me get through a little bit of it that someone else shared in the pain along with me.
Exactly.
That always helps. But how did you get the original idea for your page? What kind of started this whole thing for you?
Yeah, so in college, I was doing the whole journalism major, wanted to be a sports reporter deal, and after graduation, I was doing the college TV station thing, but after graduation, I wasn't on camera anymore, and so after like 3 or 4 years of working exclusively behind camera, I was like, I want to get this part of my career rolling again. Like, I know that people have humble beginnings and a lot of people start behind camera, but I was like, I'm impatient. I need to get something to chip away at this here. So I started the social media page. TikTok was the first place I posted and really the only place I posted for probably 1.5 or 2 years to start things out. And as far as like what content I was, going to post, I ended up landing on the Busts Anonymous series, which is what makes fun of, the underperformers in fantasy football.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's kind of been my trademark series, or at least was in the early going. And I was just like, I want to come up with an original, funny series that fills a need in the content space. And by fills a need, I mean, I know so many people play fantasy football and so many people have players that underperform for them and everybody just goes online and complains. I'm like, all right, what if I can concisely put this into a comedic video, roast these guys playfully, the athletes or the football players, and just have a place for people to kind of commiserate a little bit when their teams are bad. And I just think that's kind of what made it took off, and just making those videos over and over again kind of sharpened my skills being on camera and led to everything else I did after that.
Yeah, and I really have enjoyed watching your videos overall. I think that you hit the nail on the head. There's just not, or at least there wasn't when I started following you, a whole lot of fantasy football
content creators. I mean, there are some for sure, but nobody really had the same brand
Not in the
that you
comedic
brought.
way,
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I think really resonated with me, is because I was like, oh my gosh, I relate to this so much.
Right.
Like, this is exactly how I feel about these guys. So now that you've expanded and you've grown, and obviously your page is huge now, what was the catalyst for that? Was it really a hit right away, or did it take some work at first?
Boy.
Like, what was that first video that really set things off?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of videos I can think of. Right when I started Bust Anonymous, that was getting me 100K plus every time, and to me, that number was ridiculous. Like every time I saw it, I was like, how is this happening? How are this many people seeing it? It didn't feel real, especially during COVID, because I'm not leaving my house really much. Nobody was. So I'm getting all these views, but they kind of just look like numbers to me. Like, I don't fully grasp, I don't think, the people behind it. And I don't know if I still do to this day, but now that people come up to me in public, I do a little bit more. So that, starting that series was part of it. And then I remember I did this video that was like, what is Peyton Hillis doing now, kind of thing? Because I was like, let me do that series of just where did these athletes disappear to, and that video got like 900,000 views, and I was like, oh wow, how is that number possible for me? Somebody who, at that point I had built up an okay following on TikTok, but it was probably 40,000 ish people, and then I'm waking up to just thousands upon thousands of new followers. I'm like, this algorithm stuff. Social media has changed so much, because I remember being a kid, watching YouTubers and looking up to them, but thinking, that's impossible to build that audience. It's so hard. Now it's just, thanks to these algorithms, like, I know they're not perfect, but it's like, if you make quality stuff repeatedly, people will find it. And that's kind of what that video led to. Then there were some other series that, ended up doing well eventually, Quarterback Club, whatever. These other comedy videos I ended up doing. But certainly a couple of milestone videos, but the Peyton Hillis one sticks out just because that number was astronomical. Like, I still can't fully grasp that my videos get that still, on a somewhat regular basis. It's insane to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, where you're starting off, I mean, especially coming right out of the gate, getting that level of views, I mean, that's incredible. And I know all of our listeners out there probably have a friend or two that have tried to launch a social media page, and it's a lot of difficulty at the beginning. So it's good to know that people resonated so much with your content right out of the gate.
Yeah.
So in your line of work now, kind of going back to the overall scope of everything, what is one of the coolest experiences you've had through your social media page thus far, whether it be interacting with a famous persona or just in general, something you may have gotten invited to?
I think probably the coolest one was the NFL preseason this year. So I actually haven't gone to too many NFL games, like as a media personality, like on the sideline. I haven't done that too much, but during the preseason, I did it over the course of one weekend. I went to a San Francisco 49ers preseason game and then a Jacksonville Jaguars preseason game the day after. So it was, from Denver to San Fran to Jacksonville and back to Denver over the course of 3 days. Got to see 2 NFL stadiums, got to be on the field for both. And during the course of that, having a bunch of fans recognize me, I signed my first, and funny enough, still only autograph to this day. A kid wanted me to sign his Trevor Lawrence jersey. I felt like I was vandalizing the thing. His dad's looking at me like, who is this guy? But
I think you'll end up being bigger than Trevor Lawrence.
We'll see. Signed my first autograph, but taking a bunch of pictures. And it's just very cool to, again, put these like faces to the followership. Like, because from my little, studio at home, sometimes they are just numbers. Like, I don't fully grasp the support that I have. And then being able to see these people, have them tell me, how much I've made their day or improved their day, and they look forward to my videos all the time. That's probably my favorite and most rewarding part of the job. It's not the money. It's not the followers in general. It's like seeing these people and having it be real in that moment.
Yeah, making that impact for people out there. So, kind of going off that a little bit, outside of the autograph, what would have been your coolest fan experience that you've had so far?
Oh man, there's a couple. I remember one of the first few times I got recognized, I was at the Denver airport, and it was this little kid, like pretty young. And I wear contacts, and I had my glasses on at the time, so I was surprised he even like recognized me, anything. And so I'm sitting there on FaceTime with my girlfriend, and I hear, from my peripheral, "Are you Benchwarmer Brand?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Could I take a picture?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." Like, I'm always happy to take pictures with anybody, especially a kid, and especially when he's respectful. So that was super cool. The autograph one definitely stands out. And then there's actually been a few with, some older people like my age or older, and it's the reaction sometimes. Like, sometimes there's different levels people have. Sometimes people are super chill about it. They're like, "Hey man, love your content." Sometimes people freak out like I'm Brad Pitt, and I'm like, I I'm just a dude that makes videos, but I've had, you know, I remember this one woman at a restaurant that she was working at it actually, but she was like, "Oh my God, my husband and I watch your videos all the time. We love you so much." She's like turning red. I'm like, "What is this? This is crazy." Like I don't feel like that person until somebody points it out. So that was very cool and very validating.
Wow, that's a pretty cool story, and I think it is pretty funny how certain people just aren't able to control themselves. When
Yeah,
they
it's
come around
crazy.
their idols, and what a moment, though. I mean, overall, just having these experiences with fans, and I'm sure that they really appreciate that you take the time to like sit there and listen to their story and kind of sharing that moment with them. I think that's important.
Yeah, look, I'm a hermit. I don't leave my house that much, so when I do, if somebody's going to recognize me, I'm going to take the time to talk to them and say what's up. Like it's very cool.
Yeah. So, Bran, you know, it's good to see that you're a Nuggets fan. Obviously, living in Denver now, big deal. And us being, you know, Mile High Sports, we love to see that you're a Nuggets fan overall. So, what has been your coolest moment as a Nuggets fan that you would say, maybe in person or just in general?
I mean, I have to say it was being at the championship win last year. Like that is pure circumstance, pure luck, if you want to call it, because I actually was doing a partnership with Sports Illustrated at the time. So they bought my ticket to send me to the game and kind of do like this vlog experience. And we didn't know if they were going to finish it off in that game or not. Yeah. And if they didn't, you know, they were about to go back to Miami. So there was a good chance I wasn't going to be able to see them win it in person anyway. So being able to be there, you know, have good seats, kind of vlog the whole experience, and just being a Nuggets fan my whole life and being in person to see them win their first championship while I'm wearing my ratty Carmelo Anthony jersey that I bought in like 2007 that still fits me now because I was a chubby kid. Like all these things just made it super cool. So I can't think of anything cooler than seeing your favorite basketball team win their first championship in person. So even though it's recent, I got to go with that.
Yeah, I would have to say that's probably mine as well.
Yeah.
You know, it's a pretty incredible moment overall. Did you have a chance to go downtown and celebrate with everybody?
A little bit. We lived downtown at the time. We moved a little bit away from downtown now, but we walked through it just to get back to our apartment. So I mean, I'm not really a party guy. Like I don't drink or anything like that. So you know, we weren't going to stay out, but it was super cool to like walk through the scene of it. And again, for the vlog that I did, like there's people hanging on light poles and just, you know, laying on their horns, like, you know, creating these jingles with their car horns. It was a really wild scene. And I was very, very lucky last year to see, you know, my favorite college team in my school I went to, UConn, also win a title. But that was different because they won it in Houston. And I was there too, which again, super lucky to be able to be there. But your school and your team winning a title away from home, like away from Connecticut, not the same thing. And I kind of forgot that when I saw the Nuggets win the title. So when I left the stadium, I was like, oh my God, this is a wild scene. Like, you know, I just saw a championship a couple months ago, but this is not the same because this is the city that the team is. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it was very, very cool.
Well, that's awesome. I'm sure a lot of Nuggets fans out there would agree with you as far as peak Nuggets fandom. Yeah. I don't think it gets much better than that. So, Brandon, do you have anything coming up here on the horizon that we should be looking out for?
You know, most of my content is football focused, NFL focused. I would say with the off season coming, now, ironically enough, is maybe the best time to follow me, especially if you're a diehard football fan, because part of what I do is try to get people through the off season if the best I can. Like I don't stop making football videos. I will definitely mix in some NBA stuff, some MLB stuff, some college basketball stuff here and there. But part of the thing I take pride in with my content as an NFL guy mostly is like, I'm not going to let this be the dry time for football if you don't want it to be. Like if you're seeking out football content, I got it for you. And I have a lot more time to do it now with it being the off season and kind of having it be a little slower paced.
Nice. Well, I'm sure the NFL fans out there are really going to appreciate you, and hopefully you get some new followers here that are going to enjoy your content. But Brandon, you know, last question for you. Where's the best place for everyone to check out your content? I know you got a podcast now.
Yeah.
So where's some of the places we can watch you at?
Yeah, I try to be everywhere. So, you know, the comedy skits and stuff, Benchwarmer Brand on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. So all my like comedy skits get posted there. The longer form stuff is also on the Benchwarmer Brand YouTube channel. Or like you mentioned with the podcast, there is a separate podcast channel, which is Off the Bench with Benchwarmer Brand, and that is on YouTube. And the audio version gets posted to Spotify, Apple, and wherever else podcasts go.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Brandon. We're going to be back here with a quick State of the Nuggets segment coming up next. Awesome. Tune in after this. Welcome back to Beyond Sports. I'm the Fitted Nuggets fan, your host for today, and I'm here with a special co-host, Benchwarmer Brand.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Brandon, thanks for coming back on. So we've got a special segment for you guys today, something a little different from what we normally do. We're just going to be updating everybody on where we're feeling, where the Nuggets stand. I mean, we're about to hit All-Star break, roughly considered halfway through the season, a little bit more than halfway through the season. But a good point for us to really evaluate the team and what changes we need to make going into the rest of the year. So, Brandon, I guess I'll leave the floor open for you here. So what kind of changes do you feel like need to be made going into the rest of this year?
Yeah, it's super funny with a team coming off a championship now because it's so different. Like, obviously, this time last year, too, the Nuggets were in first place and we were feeling good, but it was like we're still chasing that championship, so we're trying to nitpick and figure out what the right moves are to make. Now, to me, it's kind of just like continuing to ride the wave, make sure that there's no major leaks in the boat. But like this team, to me, as is championship caliber. But there are a few things I'm looking at. The main thing to me is that the standings compared to this time last year are a lot closer. So it's about the Nuggets not letting their foot off the gas because home court in the playoffs and having it throughout the playoffs, I think is going to be super important. I mean, the Nuggets fans are as loud and as passionate as any fan base in the world. So, to not let a misstep knock you down to like the 4 seed. It's basically a 4-way tie right now atop the West. So you don't want a team that deserves the 1 seed and has the quality of a team that could earn the 1 seed, to fall down to 4 and then be playing, kind of from behind in terms of home court after the first round. So to me, it's just about keeping your foot on the gas and not acting like, even as a championship team, yes, we're playing for the playoffs, but there's still work to do in the regular season to make sure you're best positioned for the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. I mean, especially when you're considering how close the West is, because to your point, this time last year, through 50 games, I think we're at 51 right now, they had an identical record.
Yeah.
And actually our point differential is up 0.3 overall in overall game spread. So we've technically improved a little bit overall year over year, but I think to your credit, these other teams have improved considerably.
Yeah.
Like the Timberwolves, the Thunder, they're now very real threats that last year it was more of like a fun, like, oh, it'll be great during the regular season and we'll play them.
Yeah.
And then we beat them 4-2 in the playoffs. And
Right. I mean, this time last year, the Nuggets were leading the West by 4.5 games. Like on this date last year, they were up 4.5 games on the Grizzlies and everyone else was just kind of middling and fighting for a playoff spot. Now we are literally tied with 3 other teams atop the West. So it's just as much as the Nuggets have kind of been, steady and still the great team that we know they are, just the world around them, the Western Conference around them has improved so much that it's kind of changed things a little bit and you can't afford to get lazy.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think you're right on the money, keeping the focus, really making sure we get that home court advantage, because I agree it's going to be very difficult to beat specifically this Nuggets team at home throughout the playoffs.
Right.
I mean, anybody in a 7-game series where we get 4 at home, I don't see anybody in the entire league beating us. And so I think it is definitely something that the Nuggets have to keep a focus on, even more so than last year. And I think a big component that goes into that is really calibrating their bench rotation. And Mike Malone has been playing around with all different rotations all season. And, I think we're starting to see a little bit more from Peyton Watson these past few games. It's been up and down all year with him. I just want to see some consistency. I think that's been the hardest thing. And heading into this trade deadline this week, I think that there aren't very many moves to make. And the one move I have heard out there, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on this, is Monte Morris. And it's somebody the Nuggets are familiar with. Okay. And it's something that's come up very recently as a potential acquisition. He's currently on the Pistons, and we could potentially get him for a rather cheap trade overall, potentially Zeke Naji. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think Monte Morris could really help lift this bench up?
I think it's a possibility. I look at Monte Morris's skill set as, a kind of a better version of what Reggie Jackson offers. So in theory, yeah, it's an upgrade. It's funny you mentioned him because obviously he was, recently on the Wizards, and one of the names I saw was DeLon Wright as a potential trade target, and it was like he is kind of more of a defensive version of Reggie Jackson. I guess when I say version, I just mean point guard. He's a defensive point guard, and once you get to the playoffs where one of Jokic or Murray is on the court literally at all times, you're kind of just looking for, secondary scorers, but guys that can play within the offense and make cuts and make impacts on the defense, which is why Aaron Gordon's been such a great fit. And I think DeLon Wright could be that kind of guy, just defensively. I saw some crazy stat from Ryan Blackburn. It was like DeLon Wright is like top 100 all time in the NBA in steals per 100 possessions or something like that.
Wow.
He is like all time near the top in like steals per 100 possessions or something to that effect. And I was like, I didn't realize he was like that, but steals obviously aren't everything on defense either. I still think he would be a fun addition. And Yeah, I would like to see a move made for a guard, be it Wright or Morris, but I don't think it's a definite necessity with how well Reggie's been playing.
Yeah, Reggie Jackson has definitely stepped it up. I know heading into this year, there was a lot of doubters, including myself. I saw him flourish on the Clippers, really started to come into his own, and then we saw him eventually make his way over to the Nuggets last season. And I'm not sure how much you saw of him in the playoffs last year, or just when we acquired him up around this time last year, I believe. And it just did not look like he was going to be a good fit. And it's cool to see him do such a turnaround, especially during the time Murray was out. I think that's a major component as well, especially heading into this playoffs, just knowing that we have somebody at that secondary unit that can produce. I'd just like to see a little bit more from Reggie Jackson coming off the bench, just with how he typically averages. I mean, we're only seeing about 11.1 points per game, and that's considering the whole season, and that's also considering, I can't remember exactly how many starts he had, but quite a few.
Yeah.
So, from his perspective, I think that's what we're really missing from that bench is just a more consistent offensive producing player.
And it's
or like
all,
a Bruce Brown.
Trying, yeah, I was going to say, it's all trying to fill that Bruce Brown gap that we didn't really bother to replace. And I mean, not that we could because of, financial restrictions and all that, but I think the Nuggets in a way were expecting the guys they had to fill that gap, whether it was a team effort to do so with, Peyton Watson and Christian Brown and, just any of the rookies like Julian Strother, and it hasn't fully materialized that way yet.
Yeah, and guys like Peyton Watson and CB, I think all of us were realistically expecting them to step up. And I think Peyton Watson's taken a bit of a step. He's kind of where CB was heading into the playoffs last year, but CB really has remained stagnant. And so what are your thoughts kind of on CB heading into the rest of the season? Because I think there's still a lot of life left in CB.
Yeah, I agree. Christian Brown is tough because he was so good for the first 2 months or so of the season, and then he had as rough of a January as you can have. I mean, we're talking 27.6% from three. He was over 40% on the season before that. And this is a guy that off the bench, like you're looking, that's the title of my podcast, by the way. Nice plug. This is a guy that off the bench, you're looking to kind of space the floor and also give you that defensive, boost, but he's not spacing the floor, and I'm sure the confidence has taken a hit because of that, because he's not seeing the shots fall. That's going to hurt his defense, and he's just not even playing as many minutes as he once was because he's a liability at times. I think we have a big enough sample size with Christian Brown that I trust he will get back there. At the same time, though, I don't think you can, or I wouldn't necessarily risk going into the playoffs with just him and knowing that he's the guy you're relying on to space that floor, which is why I really like the idea of getting, again, Ryan Blackburn floated the idea of a reunion with Danilo Gallinari. He's got a cheap contract. Or getting a guy like Doug McDermott on the buyout market, because those guys are knockdown three-point shooters. They also play a forward position that we could certainly use off the bench as well. I just think I think Christian Brown will bounce back. It's just, will he bounce back to the level that we are going to need from him to give us those important minutes off the bench when it matters?
Yeah, and I think he took a huge leap in the playoffs last year and really kind of asserted himself into a position where if we don't have that role replaced going into this season, that's going to be a big deal, especially with these other teams gaining so much talent. Yeah. And I really like the idea that you floated with the reunion of Gallinari or even potentially McDermott. I think to your point, they're just knockdown three-point shooters. Yeah. And that's really realistically what the bench is missing. I mean, they're really just missing that offensive piece. I mean, when we look at the bench, Reggie Jackson, 11 points per game. Peyton Watson, 7 points per game. CB, 7 points per game. And that just doesn't cut it. And if we can get another person who has the ability to score 10 points per game when we really need it, I think that would really add a huge lift, because when we get down past those three, there's just not much depth. I mean, then we're talking about Zeke Naji, Justin Holiday, DeAndre Jordan. And while I love those guys and they play with heart, it doesn't necessarily translate to victory.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was comparing, what the Nuggets did in the playoffs last year to what they're doing in the regular season this year to kind of figure out where the gaps are. And in my head, Bruce Brown was a better three-point shooter in the playoffs last year than he actually was. He was around 30%, which, whatever. But Aaron Gordon was shooting 39% from three. And I don't know about you, I'm not banking on that again. So I would much rather have a guy that I feel can reliably stretch the floor in the playoffs, because if Aaron Gordon's not going to shoot 40% from three, which he's probably not, and you don't have somebody else on the team that can kind of provide that from beyond the arc, you're leaving yourself in a tough spot against some of these teams that can score like crazy. Like you run into the Clippers in the playoffs, who I think are the highest scoring team in the league. You're going to be potentially in trouble for as great as Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray are. You're leaving yourself a little bit vulnerable there, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can't win with just two guys. Sure. And the Clippers have a lot more than just two guys. And I think that's what makes them such a risk going into this season and the end of this season here is just that fact alone is we've got a lot of great players. There are a lot of guys on our team who are almost all-stars. You know, I think of an AG, an MPJ, a Murray. These guys could all potentially be all-stars with a little bit more usage rate or whatever you want to call it. But overall, it's just kind of incredible to see how the Nuggets work together. I think that the starting unit has actually played relatively well this season, you know, really keeping that pace up and maintaining that same offensive caliber that they had last year. I'm glad that they haven't lost a step. We have seen a bit of an offensive retraction from AG. I think he's hurt us the most in that sense. He was closer to 17 points per game last season this time, now down to about 13 points per game this season, but hard to doubt AG. I mean, he's a guy who gets it done no matter what.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think one solace for me is really that the starting unit doesn't need to really make much changes.
No.
If we can just figure out this bench rotation a little bit more going into this playoffs and just secure that number 1 seed, I think we're looking at a back-to-back.
Yeah, and in the playoffs, you're really only rolling 8 deep. So if you can get, you know, reliable contributions from really just at least one of those guys on a game-to-game basis, they can switch. It's fine. If Christian Brown wants to produce one game and Peyton Watson the next game, I think with this starting lineup, you can get by with that. But yeah, if I have to throw my money down in any team right now, I am picking the Nuggets to repeat because now they've got the experience on top of it.
Yeah, and you got to love it. The experience is what's going to make the difference at the end of the day against these younger teams, and I'm really a big fan of it. I can't wait to see these playoffs come. I want us to take our time to get there because that means it's the end of the NBA season, but man, I'm too excited to get into these playoffs. Well, Brandon, thank you again so much for joining us. We really appreciate you coming on, and for everybody out there, we're going to be coming back with one more segment after this. Tune in.
All right, welcome back to Beyond Sports. That was the current state of the Nuggets with Benchwarmer Brand. We're coming to you from 98.1 FM Mile High Sports Radio. Up next, we're going to be doing our mid-season awards. So who do we have for MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Most Improved, Coach of the Year, First Team NBA, or First Team All-NBA, First Team All-Defense?
Yeah, well, I know who I have for MVP.
Yeah.
I think our listeners know who we have for MVP.
I'm guessing most people probably think Jokic is getting his third.
Jokic is he's the one impacting the game, just kind of from every angle of it, in my opinion, from an overall league perspective. Him, SGA potentially, and
SGA in
Luka,
fairness,
obviously.
SGA is leading the league in steals. So, I mean, he's scoring 31.1 points per game, so he's scoring more. He doesn't have as many assists. He doesn't have as many rebounds, but he is affecting the defensive side a little more than Jokic is. However, I think Jokic's offensive impact just exceeds that, like it always does.
Yeah, it's just he does whatever he wants to get the win at the end of the day. Like, that's one cool thing with him. He still dominates without getting 30. Like, you watch a game and he gets 21 and he just absolutely obliterates defenses.
Yeah.
And even though the stat sheet may not totally represent that, but like when you watch the game itself unfold, Jokic is just picking apart these defenses on a regular basis. And I think that's what makes him so special, and I think that's why he's MVP.
I agree, but I also think so. Look at Luka's stats this year. He's got 34.6 points per game, 8.8 rebounds, and 9.5 assists. I mean, he's almost averaging a triple-double with almost 35 points per game. And are they not winning because the team was that bad? Because Jokic won an MVP when they were, 7th in the West, 6th in the West?
Yeah, so they were
sixth in the West 2 years ago.
Yeah, when they got eliminated by the Warriors.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's possible to get that, but to win the MVP that low in the standings. However, can Luke is it because the team is that bad, or is Luka that good?
I think right now, like what we're seeing from Luka is a need from the Mavericks, and I think he is putting these potential numbers up because he's having to overexert himself to get these wins.
I would agree with that.
And I don't think he's in as a comfortable place as Jokic, where Jokic has a good rapport with this team. He knows what to expect from them on a daily basis, and they know their roles, and so Jokic can play how he wants, whereas I think Luka is having to, like, we have to win this game. I have to do everything to make sure we win this game because his teammates aren't as reliable.
And he definitely acts on that. I mean,
Yeah.
what do you have, 70,
75.
73?
75, I thought. No, maybe
I
73.
think it was 73.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
either
it was
way.
3 more than Embiid had the same week, which is insane. I mean,
The NBA is a new demon.
yeah. And Devin Booker had 60-something points that night.
Steph Curry had 60 this week, this past week.
Yeah.
Steph Curry's been on a heater ever since he wasn't named All-Star starter.
All right, well, let's keep on track here a little bit. Let's go to the next one. I think we both agree Jokic would be our MVP.
Yeah.
Who would be your second?
I think that'd be tough. I think SGA is a more well-rounded player with a better record. They've improved the most as well. So I think overall SGA has the best case. His stats, while aren't necessarily quite as impressive as Luka, I think the other additions, including his defensive stats, leading the league in steals in addition to that, definitely gives him the edge over Luka. So I'd have to put Luka at third, though I still think Luka deserves to get an MVP at some point in his career. I think it would be incredibly unfair for him not to at some point.
Yeah, for how he's playing right now, I mean, especially with Kyrie being out a lot of the games that he has, he's just had a phenomenal season. And they're not as bad as they probably should be.
I agree, but also Kyrie's a pretty good number 2 teammate. I mean, that's his natural role when you look at when he's been the most successful, and that was truly when he was with LeBron.
He's just been out a lot, is what I'm saying.
No, absolutely, and that's been tough. And then you don't really have anybody outside of that. I mean, who's your next person up after you have Kyrie? I mean, realistically, maybe Derek Lively at this
Derek
point.
Lively and Tim Hardaway.
And that's tough to rely on. Tim Hardaway Jr. would be probably the correct answer out of that. Now, they have made some moves. They went and got P.J. Washington, so we'll see how that works out. I think that gives them a little bit more power in the post, which is something that they're definitely in need of. So we'll see. The Mavericks, trying to make some smart moves.
Who would you have as your most improved player?
Most improved player would be tough. I could make a case for Tyrese Halliburton, in my opinion. Also, Tyrese Maxey. I think Tyrese Maxey overall definitely deserves it. But, man, Halliburton has taken a massive step. I know he's not on everybody's radar, but definitely somebody who went from a mid, maybe potentially deserving to be all-star, to unquestioned starter in a matter of a season. And that's pretty incredible. But Tyrese Maxey's taken a similar jump.
That's what I was about to say was, while I think Halliburton has taken a very big leap since last year, I think Maxey's taken just as big of one.
He jumped a canyon.
He looks phenomenal this year.
Yeah.
And if Embiid was healthy this whole season, they would be super dangerous in the playoffs. Hopefully he comes back and he's okay and can actually play at 100% or at least close to it so they can compete, because Maxey looks really good. They just got Buddy Hield on the trades. 76ers look fun at the very least. They did get rid of Pat Beverly, which I didn't like. I kind of loved him for a Philly team.
I always feel like that's just Pat Beverly, though. And unfortunately for Pat,
Yeah.
he's a dog, but he's kind of a stray dog. Like, he keeps getting passed around to different organizations, and they picked up Kyle Lowry. So I think overall the Sixers definitely won in that overall interaction. But
Yeah.
I think we got to move on here. I mean, rookie of the year right now, pretty close race between Wemby and Chet.
I agree and disagree. I think kind of statistically it is. Chet's also like a third option on his team. He's not which considering his stats, those are very nice. But I just think Wemby's team doesn't have anything around him.
Yeah, and I think that's also a reason that he could have some potentially inflated numbers, whereas Chet is producing at a pretty high level, much higher percentage in the overall field goal percentage.
Yeah, he's shooting better.
46% from Wemby versus 53.6% from Chet, and then 31.6% from Wemby from three versus 39.7% from Chet, and only a separation of roughly 3 points per game between them. I think that's a pretty big leap. I would rather have somebody like Chet on my team getting it more effectively done.
I think it depends. I think you'd see a difference if there was, say, any other guy on the Spurs that could take away attention on the offense. Like, I think it's just difficult for Wemby to be able to really do extremely well considering his usage rate because there's so much defensive coverage on him.
Yeah, teams by now are
'Cause
definitely
he's
prepared for
7'12".
Wemby. Yeah,
He's
they know he's a
gigantic.
threat. There's
Yeah.
no hiding Wemby. And, one thing I think we both can agree on is these guys are special talents, and they're going to be big in the league for a long time to come. And it's a cool way to see kind of how the new NBA is going to play out with these more 7'3", 7'4" bigs who can play like Kevin Durant. As the NBA continues to evolve, I think this is going to be a really exciting thing to watch.
Yeah. Who would you have for your first team All-NBA? Point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center. Keep in mind the requirements, too. So Tyrese Halliburton, Joel Embiid, they're likely out.
Yeah, so, overall, first team right now, it's tough. I think we'd have to have our MVP conversation people in there. So SGA, Luka, Jokic, I think those are automatic. And then I think it gets tough. And I think realistically, you have a lot of players who are roughly producing at a same points per game status, but you're seeing more on the defensive end. So I would think of a Giannis who kind of has the ability to dominate and overtake that game,
Giannis in the 4.
and a team that is a legitimate title contender as well. Not that necessarily has an effect on an all-NBA team, but you still want to look at guys who are getting the job done correctly.
Would you have Jason Tatum in that conversation? Because I think I would put him at the 3.
I don't see an argument against that, especially in the Eastern Conference. I can't really think of too many threes in the Eastern Conference off the top of my head who I'd put ahead of Jason Tatum.
Yeah, me
Can't think of any.
I would say Luka and SGA are the guards.
Oh, I guess
and
with
then
both
for the
conferences.
for both conferences, and then for the forwards, it would be Jason Tatum, Giannis, and then Jokic at the center.
So then who's our one spot? There's a lot of options there for a point guard.
It would be either Luka or SGA. Those are the two
Luka,
guards.
Yeah.
Those are the two guards that we have.
Yeah, I could see that. Absolutely. And I think SGA definitely deserves to be on that list. You can't leave him off. He's been dominating his
Not
teams
for
in
how
first.
he's playing, yeah.
Yeah, he definitely deserves a spot on that list. What I love about the NBA this year, though, is it's so talented and well-rounded. And it's just been so fun to watch. And no matter what team you turn on, aside from the Pistons, but even the Pistons have some cool potential players developing, like a Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey and all these other players who are kind of coming out and coming into their own. And it's exciting to see almost any team in the NBA right now. There's a lot of special talent out there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that was our midseason awards with Beyond Sports. Be sure to follow us on social media at Beyond Sports 5280. Call into the show at 720-446-8463. Again, that number is 720-446-8463. Be sure to check out next week's episode. We're going to the All-Star Game, so we're going to have some really good content coming up for you.